Hey, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles. And here are the stories we're watching tonight, starting with what was just uncovered in that latest indictment of former President Donald Trump.
I'm an innocent man. I'm an innocent person.
But now that the federal indictment has been unsealed and we can see Trump faces more than 30 charges, will Republicans still rally behind him?
No one is above the law. And in America, we have to stand on the rule of law.
NBC's Ken Delaney joins us in a minute to break it all down. Then scientists discover the first ever virgin birth of a crocodile and look back 80 years ago when the Zoot riots rocked the city of L.A.
The Zoot riots have been one of Los Angeles' most shameful moments in our history.
Hey, good evening. Tonight we have had a little bit of time to read and process this 40-some page federal indictment of former President Donald Trump. And inside a meticulous play-by-play of the 37 federal charges that Trump is now facing. And here's the bottom line. They kind of fall into two categories. We're going to make this as big picture as possible. So one, allegedly keeping about 100 secret documents he wasn't supposed to keep. And two, allegedly lying or conspiring to lie about it to the feds. And we also got our first look at newly unsealed pictures that show boxes inside of Mar-a-Lago, and that is part of the investigation. Pictures of boxes with documents stacked up in a ballroom, stacked up in what you're looking at, a bathroom, a storage room, that bathroom with a chandelier. And if you look past that, you could see some of those boxes were even in the shower. Now, it's important to note that all of these boxes that you're seeing right now, what they do show and what they don't show. Those boxes do show the sheer number of documents that Trump took after leaving the White House. They also show how they were stored in a place known to be a target for spying. But the feds are not charging Trump with criminal counts because of tens of thousands of documents in boxes. Instead, this is all centered around the discovery of 102 documents during the FBI's raid of Mar-a-Lago, and that's when the feds found 27 classified documents in his office and 75 documents in his storage room. So just what was in those documents is something that we're going to get to in just a little bit here. But as all this was being unsealed today, we also saw a very massive twist in this whole saga. You know how we've been hearing from Trump's lawyers all night and into this morning? Jim Trusty, his lawyer, going on Fox, going on CNN, even Today's Show, all making the case for Trump. Well, guess what? He's apparently out. That guy, no longer Trump's lawyer, and it's not just him. Another one of his top lawyers also just quit as well. Trump is now being represented by the lawyer he's using in that Manhattan porn star hush money case. And finally, we also heard from the prosecutor leading this case, special counsel Jack Smith, who didn't say much, but did say this.
Our laws that protect national defense information are critical to the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. Violations of those laws put our country at risk.
Let's bring in NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney to break it all down. Ken, first off, that statement at the podium from Jack Smith, so much of that was what they always seem to say in cases like this. No one's above the law, kind of what you'd expect. But then you read the indictment, and right here on page 9, someone else says the exact same thing, right?
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, Donald Trump made a campaign out of criticizing Hillary Clinton for playing fast and loose with classified information and made a lot of statements to the effect that, look, classified information needs to be taken care of. And now in this indictment, I cannot imagine a more damaging set of facts and allegations about the handling of classified information, lying about it, and then allegedly obstructing justice and trying to cover it up. Gadi.
We've got some of these statements that Trump made about classified documents and about the protection of classified documents. One, he says, in my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law. September 6, 2016, he says something very similar. We can't have someone in the Oval Office who doesn't understand the meaning of the word confidential and classified. Now, I know we still don't know what's in these documents specifically, but we do know that they were classified, confidential, and we seem to at least know what they were about. Is that right?
We know a lot about what they were about, and some of them were top secret. And that's one of the remarkable things about this indictment, Gadi, is that it says in the third paragraph that we're talking about information about weapon systems of the United States, about American nuclear programs, foreign weapon systems, vulnerabilities, information that could threaten CIA sources and NSA intercepts. So really, really sensitive stuff that could, the disclosure of which could cost lives. And the list of intelligence agencies whose material is at issue in this indictment is like all the big ones: the CIA, the NSA, the Energy Department, the Defense Department. So very, very damaging stuff. We expect our president to uphold the laws, and this is an indictment that says that Donald Trump violated many of them.
And when we're looking at some of the counts here, and we're looking at the description of the documents, we're talking conversations with heads of states, we're talking nuclear secrets, we're talking things like what appear to be possibly battle plans and what our military is capable of. Mar-a-Lago, is that a secure place, or is that a place where you have, thousands and thousands of people coming through and possibly like a big target when it comes to spies?
Right. It's absolutely not a secure place. But and that actually raises a good point, right? The most damaging possible allegation is not in this indictment. They don't allege that Donald Trump tried to sell material to Saudi Arabia or that material fell into the hands of a foreign adversary. But at the same time, they can't really know whether that happened if this stuff is sitting in an insecure place at Mar-a-Lago. And what they do allege in the indictment is that at least on 2 occasions, Donald Trump showed highly classified material to people who weren't cleared to see it. In one case, a political action committee aide. In another case, there's a whole tape recording, a transcript of a tape recording that they have where they say Trump was referencing a document that we know was about military options to attack Iran. So some of the most sensitive material that a president could have access to, he was waving it around in a conversation that was about a book to be written by a former aide. So just mind-boggling, Gadi.
And it looks like you're out there possibly in front of the courthouse. What do you think we're going to see on Tuesday? How do you think it's going to play out?
So it's going to be a remarkable scene. Here you have Donald Trump. He's going to have to surrender to either the FBI or the federal marshals. He'll be processed. That means he'll be fingerprinted. A mugshot will be taken, although it won't be released. They will demand that he turn over his passport. Then he'll go into court, make what's called a first appearance, and he'll be asked how he pleads. We expect him to plead not guilty. Nobody expects that the judge is going to order him detained, but it'll be interesting to see whether the judge places any restrictions on what he can say, for example, about the prosecutors in this case. The most amazing thing about all this to me would be that here is the man who used to be the head of this government. He was in charge of the executive branch, essentially being booked by these same agencies that he once used to supervise, Gadi.
And Ken, last question. I mean, how do you think there's going to be a lot of people there at the courtroom? It seems like, you look at any of these comment sections, it seems like you check Truth Social, and a lot of people have been expressing their desire to go to that courthouse. What do you think the scene is going to be like outside the courthouse?
Well, I'm sure there'll be a big security perimeter. Where I am, there's a large sort of open area that the police presumably will wall off, but it's a real concern. The Secret Service, the marshals, the local PD are all planning right now for what is going to be an ongoing series of security threats. I'm going to try to be in that courtroom to watch history being made, and we can only hope that the security officers will have things in hand, Gadi.
And we'll be checking back with you all week next week. Ken Delanian, thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, so here's the thing. All of this flurry of charges and the investigations and even potential prison time, it can all go away in an instant come January 2025. Because remember, right now, Trump is the front runner for the 2024 Republican presidential ticket. He's got a shot at winning the presidency. And one power that comes with being a president, the ability to pardon someone. The big question now is, could he use that power to pardon himself? And that is something that he's talked about in the past. Like this tweet from 2018, he thinks he can do it. But as NBC's Hallie Jackson tells us, it is a lot more complicated than that.
It's a question that's never been asked before because it hasn't happened before. Can a president pardon themselves for their own crimes? Former President Trump thought so back in 2018, talking about allegations he colluded with Russia.
I do have an absolute right to pardon myself, but I'll never have to do it because I didn't do anything wrong. And everybody knows it.
But experts say the potential for a self-pardon is not so clear.
A lot's left open to interpretation.
We just have to wait and see.
We'd have to litigate it, and we'd have to see.
Here's why it's such a complicated question. The Constitution does not specifically get into whether it's allowed, saying only the president shall have power to grant pardons except in cases of impeachment. That's it. Nothing on self-pardons. The Justice Department tried to clear things up back in 1974, right before Richard Nixon got impeached. In a memo, the DOJ determined basically, no, a president cannot self-pardon because no one can be a judge in their own case.
Just like we don't let people be the prosecutor or the judge or the jury in their own case, the argument goes, you can't be the pardoner in your own case.
Since then, that legal opinion has never been tested until maybe now. If Mr. Trump were to win the White House in 2024, he could try to pardon himself on those new federal charges within minutes of inauguration. But experts say it would very likely go to the Supreme Court to decide whether that self-pardon would hold. And remember, it's a court that has a conservative majority because of the nominations of Mr. Trump himself.
And the court that we have right now is one that I think is very receptive to the prospect of broad presidential power.
Keep in mind, these new federal charges are not the only legal issues faced by Mr. Trump. He's been charged in New York related to hush money payments and has pleaded not guilty. But those are state-level crimes. So a presidential pardon's off the table there.
The clause in the Constitution limits a president's pardon powers to offenses against the United States, commonly understood to mean federal offenses.
Down in Georgia, Mr. Trump also faces an investigation built around his 2020 election fraud lies. He denies any wrongdoing there, but the potential to pardon himself would depend on the specific charges the district attorney might bring and whether they were to involve multiple states or jurisdictions, say Georgia along with D.C. Again, it's that federal versus state difference.
Once it becomes federal, then there is that possibility of a presidential pardon. So that's a reason to keep things in state court if you're the state prosecutor.
So bottom line, could Mr. Trump pardon himself on at least some counts if he ends up in the White House? He could try, but whether it sticks will almost certainly depend on what the Supreme Court says. Of course, if he doesn't win, whoever is in the White House could simply pardon Mr. Trump themselves on those federal charges, at least one current competitor suggesting they're open to it.
Would you look at potentially pardoning Trump himself based on the evidence that might emerge of those charges?
The DOJ and FBI have been weaponized. Any example of disfavored treatment based on politics or weaponization would be included in that review, no matter how small or how big.
Hallie Jackson, NBC News.
And you know voters have some opinions on how this Trump indictment is playing out. And while some are questioning his chances for 2024, others are rallying to his defense. NBC's news correspondent Jesse Kirsch spoke to some voters in Iowa, and here's part of what he heard.
In the Republican nominating contest, Iowa voters speak first when they caucus. So obviously, we pay a lot of attention to what they're thinking here. And Republican candidates pay a lot of attention to this state as well. So we asked some voters here in Pella, Iowa, outside Des Moines, what they made of the news that former President Donald Trump is now facing a federal indictment. Here's some of what voters shared with us.
I don't know that I can trust him again.
Party's going to take note of that.
You mean you think?
Not get the nomination.
Donald Trump was who he is before the indictment, and he'll be the same after. That indictment doesn't have any effect on my opinion about him, positive or negative. I'm not going to vote for him.
And the overarching sentiment, as you can hear from people that we spoke with here, whether they are with the former president or not supporting him at this point, the news of a federal indictment hasn't moved the needle for them. It is not a deal breaker either way. Back to you.
Jesse Kirsch, thanks so much. And turning now to the other big story we've been watching this week, and it's that unrelenting smoke blanketing the East Coast. Fortunately, the worst seems to be behind New York City, but this afternoon, Philadelphia's air quality level was still ranked as unhealthy for sensitive groups. The National Weather Service says about 75 million people are still under air quality alerts. Now, models from NOAA and Blue Sky Canada are showing the smoke haze moving south and hopefully out to the Atlantic Ocean over the weekend. And NBC's George Solis has more.
And as forecasted, conditions are drastically better here in Philadelphia and much of the Northeast. Now, there is still a little bit of a haze, but nothing in comparison to what we saw over the last 48 to 72 hours when some of the skylines in the Northeast were virtually invisible because of the dense smoke. Now, according to the EPA Air Now app, which is arguably one of the most downloaded and popular apps, the air quality actually good right now here in Philadelphia. Still, out of an abundance of caution, the Philadelphia School District had students learning virtually today, as did New York schools. That expected to transition back to in-person learning over the weekend. But of course, here at the airport, conditions much better as well. The FAA still warning travelers to keep an eye on their apps for their travel, just in case this should take a turn for the worse. Many travelers I spoke with today still a little weary about that overall air quality. Some of them still wearing masks, others saying they feel much better about it now. Take a listen to what some of the travelers I spoke with told me.
I am a little bit worried. I have a mild asthma, so that concerns me.
I'm job searching right now, and I was looking at New York, and I was like, do I want to live here? Like, will I be able to stay here if I move here for the long term? I don't know.
Of course, many travelers also worry that this is going to become a recurring problem as these Canadian wildfires continue to burn throughout the summer. For now, many quite literally breathing a sigh of relief. But keep in mind, for many, this isn't just about travel. This is also about their health concerns. Some travelers I spoke with say they have underlying health conditions, so they worry this might impact them for the future. They also worry about their pets. But again, because the air quality is starting to improve, many hoping that this weekend is one that they can get outdoors, celebrate a little bit, and enjoy the clean air, at least for now. Back to you.
And like we mentioned, some relief from the smoke is expected this weekend. Let's bring in NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns to see what else is on the way. Bill, what can we expect?
We're not going to see any pictures like Mars, so that's a good place to start, Gadi. Yeah, after this week. We still have the fires in Canada, so periodically, if the winds are in the bad direction for us, we are going to see areas of smoke. So yesterday's smoke that was all in the mid-Atlantic really thick is now blown off into the Atlantic, so that's good. But you notice the direction of the clouds here, still coming from Quebec southwards. That's why there's some periods of smoke mixed in. And there's actually been some fires north of Michigan that have now come down with some smoke. So some of the worst air quality out there right now is from areas from Detroit into southern Michigan. So here's where we stand right now. All of the yellow shows where there's maybe at least a little bit of haze, not dangerous for you to go outside, and especially if you're, not in the unhealthy group. But this little area, I was mentioning, just not far from Chicago, this is where a little smoke plume has pushed down into areas of Michigan. So we'll continue to watch isolated areas through the weekend. As far as the worst goes, there's that Michigan into northern Indiana, especially not far from South Bend. And as we look at the air quality monitors, New York at one point was in the hazardous level. Now it's at 34, completely normal, fine for everyone to go out there. And we've really lowered the numbers in D.C. and Richmond. And by the way, we broke the records for the worst air quality since monitoring began about 24 years ago. And almost every city on the I-95 corridor except Boston. Boston really never got into this. Notice Detroit, with that smoke in the air, you are in that unhealthy labeled group. Chicago, not bad at 68. Louisville's been in and out of some smoky air during the day today. So here's our smoke forecast. There's a little bit that's down around Washington, D.C. and Philly. That is heading out. As we wake up tomorrow morning, some of that smoke that I was just talking about in southern Michigan will be over the top of Ohio and Pittsburgh. Now, not all smoke is at the ground. Sometimes it's up in the air and never gets to the ground level. So that was what was really different about this last event, is it was right down on the bottom. And so as we head through the weekend, notice a couple plumes here and there. You'll get some of those hazy sunshines, hazy sun, and especially the sunset and sunrise have a little orange glow to it. And even 7 a.m. Sunday from New York to Hartford, still some smoke blowing through. So here's how we look. And the fires haven't stopped in Canada. They're still widespread. Quebec, and these are the fires that were producing some of that smoke in Michigan during the day today. And we're not going to see a lot of rain still. We're going to get some as we go throughout Tuesday. In the west, we could get significant rain where some of those fires are. So this will help things, but not put them out for sure. So the weekend forecast, Saturday, a little bit of haze, clear skies, rain in the middle of the country, and maybe isolated thunderstorms, especially in the mountainous areas of California. And that will be even into Sunday, Gadi. So nothing like what we saw, but I have a funny feeling all summer long I'm going to be mentioning some smoke, at least periodically.
Yeah, such a reminder that things can change in an instant. Bill Cairns, thanks so much. And we've got a lot more news to get to this hour. Up next, an update on the man suspected in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway. We're going to tell you what happened in an Alabama courtroom today, so stay tuned. Hey there, welcome back. And here's some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Joran Vandersloot, the prime suspect in the 2005 disappearance of Natalie Holloway, was brought to a U.S. court today. He pleaded not guilty to federal charges of wire fraud and extortion. Now, Vandersloot was extradited to the U.S. from Peru this week to face those charges. And in Texas, the FBI arrested a businessman at the center of a scandal that led to AG Ken Paxton's impeachment. Nate Paul, a real estate agent or real estate developer, was taken into custody yesterday and booked into an Austin jail. It's still not clear what charges he's been arrested on. And new developments in Idaho today in that quadruple murder case at the University of Idaho. A judge heard arguments today from a murder victim's family's attorney regarding that gag order in place, which restricts those involved from talking to the media. The judge is expected to make a ruling soon. And the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii is erupting, and tourists are flocking to the Big Island to see it. Tourism officials are urging people to be respectful. The alert level was lowered from warning to watch because the rate of lava flow is starting to go down. So far, no buildings or roads are in danger. And a University of South Florida professor resurfaced today after living underwater for 100 days. He was living in a 100-square-foot lab 22 feet below the surface. They nicknamed him Dr. Deep Sea, and Joseph DeTuri says his goal was to work on projects related to brain injury and PTSD. And the Zoot Suit riots. To a lot of us, when you hear Zoot Suit riots, you think throw back a bottle of beer. But the story behind that 90s song is a pretty dark one. And it started 80 years ago this week here in Los Angeles. In 1943, white sailors attacked young Mexican, Latino, Filipino, and black men for wearing those wide lapels and big-shouldered suits in a series of riots that swept the city. And today, the city of Los Angeles is finally saying sorry for its role in what happened. And last month, the county of Los Angeles did the same.
It's the summer of 1943. Young men are being drafted into World War II. Swing music fills the clubs, and couples dance to the Lindy Hop and the Jitterbug. And Zoot Suits are all the rage, mostly being worn by black and Latino men in working-class neighborhoods across the country. With their big shoulders, sprawling lapels, and peg-leg pants, the look is unmistakable. The style was born in Harlem. But on the West Coast, Mexican-Americans made it their own. Chicanos who wore the Zoot Suits were called pachucos. But the suits were heavy on fabric, and because of the Second World War, there was a rationing of wool and other materials.
We're going to tighten our belts another notch for war.
At the time, many people saw those who wore Zoot Suits during the war as un-American. Then in June 1943, the riots broke out. White uniformed servicemen walked the streets of Los Angeles, attacking and beating up Latino, black, and Filipino men wearing the Zoot Suits. Those racist mobs would eventually include off-duty police officers and plain old civilians, and it went on for a week. Newspapers at the time blamed what they called Latino hoodlums and gangsters for the violence. Now, some 80 years later, LA County is apologizing.
The Zoot Suit riots have been one of Los Angeles' most shameful moments in our history.
I am a classic car driver and a vintage enthusiast. We are so grateful that this is being recognized and are all in favor of denouncing the injustice as we see it, targeting Chicanos, blacks, Filipinos, and we're very grateful for the opportunity to be heard and seen and the opportunity to speak for the past, present, and future, as my great-grandfather was a Zoot Suiter and experienced the riots.
After those riots, the Zoot Suit style mostly disappeared. Mostly.
A lot of our customers come to wear Zoot Suits because it's part of their culture and it's part of their tradition. Their fathers wore Zoot Suits. Their grandfathers wore Zoot Suits. Their great-grandfathers were pachucos back in the day. And they know all about, the troubles and everything that their family went through.
Vanessa Estrella's family has been selling authentic Zoot Suits in Fullerton, California since 1978.
It's also a feeling that you get, proudness. You feel proud to be able to represent the culture and the people that wore it back in the day, because to them, they were proud of wearing Zoot Suits.
And coming up, a scientific phenomena straight out of Jurassic Park. For the first time ever, a crocodile made herself pregnant. But first, you got to see this. His furry friend had a D.C. residents very concerned there. This young black bear seen moseying down the streets in the D.C. suburbs. The D.C. Zoo was called in, but he was almost impossible to catch. After chilling out in a neighbor's tree for hours, he shimmies down, runs off. Animal rescue was eventually able to catch him in, bring him back to the woods. A happy ending right there. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Let's get you caught up in 30 seconds. Donald Trump denies any wrongdoing after being indicted on 37 counts surrounding classified documents. He's expected to surrender to Miami authorities on Tuesday. And it may look a little better outside on the East Coast, but the air quality from those Canada wildfires is still pretty bad. Luckily, conditions are expected to get even better tomorrow. And the man suspected in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway back in 2005 was in court today. Jorn Vandersloot pleaded not guilty to federal wire fraud and extortion charges. Now, this next story sounds like something straight out of Jurassic Park. And in fact, it actually happened in Costa Rica, which is where those movies take place. So get this. In this newly published paper, scientists there say that they have documented the first known case of a crocodile having a virgin birth, immaculate croc conception. And it happened at a zoo back in 2018 when a female crocodile laid about 14 eggs, which is interesting because she had been living alone there for years. And what's even more interesting is that after incubating the eggs for a few months, one of them had a fully developed but stillborn baby crocodile in it. When they looked at the fetus's DNA, they found that it was created without the genetic DNA of a male crocodile, which means the female crocodile did it all by herself. Joining us now is biologist Jeff Corwin. He is also the host of Ocean Treks with Jeff Corwin. Jeff, life literally found a way here, right? Is this common?
Gadi, it's pretty amazing when you think about it, and it shows you the power of nature and how genetics drives us towards success and failure. And nature, this is a great example of the ultimate parachute for survival. It's actually scientifically known as parthenogenesis, which is the ability of a female to reproduce and create offspring without having an encounter with a male, with another partner. So essentially, she's using her own DNA to create a viable embryo, which she then either lays or gives birth to. And that's the term parthenogenesis, which literally means it's Greek for virgin birth.
So we've got evolution, which takes place over, I don't know, millions and millions of years. Crocodiles have been around forever, and yet we have her sitting there in a zoo. Are we seeing something that we might see a lot more of? Is this a quick evolution based on captivity in zoos? Why is this happening?
Hey, Gadi, you're right. You talk about evolution taking millions of years, something incredible about science. Remember when we used to believe in science? Well, this is a great example of the power of science. So this is the first example of this happening in a zoo, but it's very likely that this isn't the first crocodile to experience parthenogenesis. We know of at least 50 different species of reptiles that do this. There are lizards, there are geckos, there are species of snakes. Copperheads can do it. Anacondas can do it. What's interesting, though, about parthenogenesis is that you have two different types. You have obligatory or facultative. So facultative means when the conditions are right, a female can do this. Obligatory means that some species can only produce 100% through a virgin birth. For example, the Brimini blind snake, which originates in Asia, they are 100% female, and they only produce through this unique process. So what is great about parthenogenesis? Well, it's a great way to kind of mass reboot a species. It's excellent for colonization. So imagine an island situation like the Galapagos. A species would have to trial and error time after time, drifting there to colonize a new species there. But incredibly, with parthenogenesis, you only need one. So, for example, the Bimini blind snake that species that originated in Asia is now existing throughout tropical countries around the world, even in Hawaii, because it only takes one to find its way in a potted plant, hence its name, the flower pot snake, to literally spread itself around the world. The price you pay for parthenogenesis is that you tend to have a lower level of genetics, and you mostly only produce females.
That's why we like the Jeff Corwin explanation better than the Jeff Goldblum explanation.
I don't even know where that even came from. That came from college genetics.
Wow. There is another story that I've been wanting to talk to you about. We've been following it very closely. It's the vaquita marina down in the Sea of Cortez. They are those tiny porpoises that are on the razor's edge of extinction. Last time we were down there, there was a fear that there were only like 7 or 8 maybe left in the entire world. And there's some headlines that say a dozen or so vaquita porpoises have been spotted in the Gulf there with calves. When you saw that news, what went through your mind?
A glimmer of hope, maybe a slight little reflection of light in what otherwise is a dark tunnel that's twisting its way down to extinction. The vaquita really is on the verge of extinction. There's maybe a dozen of these beautiful little charismatic porpoises left. They are the smallest of the porpoises and dolphins, only about 5 feet in length, weighing about 90 pounds. They are on the verge of disappearing. So, yes, it is hopeful to see that they are reproducing, but they are vastly off the scale at the level that they need to be doing to reproduce, to even get to a self-sustained level. Gadi, why are we losing this species? The biggest reason is because they get entangled in fishing line and ghost nets. So not a lot of people are killing vaquitas. They are protected, and I think they are revered throughout their range in Baja. But the problem is there's a lot of illegal fishing in the native waters where they thrive, or actually where they're barely surviving, not thriving, and they get caught up in those nets. Plastic waste, we put about 10 billion pounds of plastics in our oceans every year. You add that up, throw in a little climate change, it is a recipe for extinction.
Yeah, and unfortunately, those gill nets, I mean, the last time we were down there, we saw a lot of illegal fishing with those gill nets. Hopefully that's going to
big problem around the world
sometime soon. Yeah. Jeff Corwin, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And speaking of time on the water, volunteers in Cleveland are going fishing, but they're not using fishing poles and they are not catching fish. So what exactly are they doing? Well, NBC News Now anchor Joe Fryer hopped into a kayak to find out.
So we're down here at the beautiful Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, Ohio. Beautiful. I think she's beautiful, you know, and it's got its problems, but every day we're out here trying to make it even more beautiful.
For Eddie Olshansky, the road to beauty runs through water.
All right, we're in search of garbage? We sure are.
Navigated by kayak as we comb the river's banks for trash.
All right, got my garbage bag. There you go. And how about one of these? Got my grabber. Bestow upon you a grabber. All right. Try not to lose it.
Our search does not take long.
What do you find in there? We got a beer can, a couple of water bottles, and just some big chunks of styrofoam.
For Eddie, this cleanup is more than the occasional volunteer project. As the founder of an organization called Trash Fish, he's out here at least 5 days a week, and often he's not alone.
I feel confident. I feel really motivated and pumped to help the environment out today.
With help from social media, Eddie has recruited a school of trash fish to help.
There's no money in picking up trash, I promise you that. But without us, I think this river system is far worse off.
The Cuyahoga has a notorious past known decades ago as the Burning River. It was so polluted with oil and waste, it caught fire more than a dozen times. Such environmental disasters led to the creation of the EPA in 1970, and shortly after, the Clean Water Act. Flames are no longer a concern. Trash is. You see, the Cuyahoga flows directly into Lake Erie, the water source for about 12 million people.
This river, this section of this river, is the last chance we have to stop this stuff before it actually gets into our drinking water.
Eddie redirects some of that stuff
30 pounds of basketballs
to his garage.
This is part of some of my collection of what I think is interesting stuff that I've pulled out of the river over the last couple of years.
He's found balls, toys, and just a couple years ago, this decades-old Pepsi can.
That just tells me that all the plastic that we put in there today is going to be there in 50 years. It's going to be there in 100 years. It's probably going to be there in 1,000 years.
He brings these items to his speaking engagements, including these old aerosol cans, which look more like modern art.
When stuff like this ends up in the river and it gets punctured, underwater, all that foam comes out, and this is what it solidifies as.
The most concerning things he finds, tiny beads of plastic called nurdles. They're the building blocks of almost all plastic products, often confused for food by marine life.
Joe, here's our first nurdle of the day.
Oh, you already found a nurdle?
Certainly did. It never takes long.
We find them all over, even in a plastic soda bottle.
What do you think's also in there?
Nurdles?
There's a bunch of nurdles in here.
You got nurdles in there.
But, like a drop in the ocean, bit by bit, Eddie and his trash fish are making waves by cleaning up the river.
How amazed are you by the things you see in the water?
Oh, I can't even make up the stuff that we find.
Eddie estimates since he started in 2015, they've reeled in nearly 100,000 pounds of trash.
I do feel like you're making a difference, and I think everybody does their part, that you can chip away at it a little bit.
Every bit counts, right?
Every bit counts.
And that is what keeps Eddie fishing for trash.
Does this feel like your life's work now?
It sure is at this point. I don't think that I intended for it to be when I first started doing this, but if you were out here every day seeing what I see and you knew the people in this community, you'd want to be out here every day too, I think.
Joe Fryer, NBC News.
Paddling with purpose. How about that? NBC's Joe Fryer, thanks so much for that story. Now, the countdown is on for the 2024 Summer Olympics. And when we come back, we're bringing you to Paris, where work is already underway for those events. The Eiffel Tower is even getting a makeover, and NBC got rare access to the tower. So you're not going to want to miss that. Hey, welcome back. Now let's take a look at some of the news making headlines around the world. Ukraine's long-awaited counteroffensive to take back the eastern part of the country is currently underway, and for the first time, they are sending Western tanks into battle. And specifically, it's those German-made Leopard 2 tanks they got after months of NATO negotiations. These tanks can hit their targets from 3 miles away, which is a huge upgrade from the tanks Ukraine's previously been using. Boris Johnson has resigned from UK Parliament. Today, the former Prime Minister said he would step down as a lawmaker ahead of an investigation over whether he lied to his colleagues about throwing parties during COVID lockdowns. Now, this doesn't mean Johnson's political career is over. As he says, quote, "It is very sad to be leaving Parliament, at least for now." And a Russian man is eaten alive by a tiger shark off the coast of Egypt. Now, this happened yesterday, and a video appearing to show the attack shows him being repeatedly attacked by the shark before being pulled under. Nearly 50 miles of coastline has been shut down as a result of the attack, and Egyptian authorities say it'll remain closed until at least on Sunday. And a pair of rubber ducks are quacking up quite a storm of laughter in Hong Kong. The nearly 60-foot rubber duckies are part of a Dutch art installation called Double Ducks. The artist says it's meant to spread happiness around Hong Kong, and a lot of people there say the ducks are doing a pretty good job of that. And it seems very far away, but the countdown is already on for the 2024 Olympics in Paris. Now, the City of Light is doing a lot to get ready, from restoring the Notre Dame Cathedral to polishing the iconic Eiffel Tower. And NBC's Keir Simmons has more.
Rising more than 1,000 feet above the City of Light, at night illuminating the Paris sky, the Eiffel Tower is one of the most iconic sights in the world, and the centerpiece for the Olympics. Kicking off the countdown to the Games, it will tower over the event just as it did the last time the Olympics were here, 100 years ago. NBC News was given special access to the tower and an incredible insight into Gustav Eiffel himself, who designed her and helped design another beacon of freedom and modernity, the Statue of Liberty. Madame Eiffel. Miriam Lorna de Eiffel is Gustave Eiffel's great-great-granddaughter. Look at this. This is formidable. As with so many modern ideas, the tower was not initially welcomed by all Parisians.
She was too modern. She was too modern and she was frightening. It was a monster of iron. It's so frightening for people.
Paris just wouldn't be Paris without the Eiffel Tower.
She's more than 130 years old now, so it takes a little TLC to keep her functioning and beautiful. It's safe, right?
It is, because thanks to these guys, it's safe. So it's a lot of painting, firstly, because all this...
Well, look, because there's guys here, and there were guys up here.
So we have to paint it every 7 years to protect the iron of the structures from the rust.
Jean-Francois Martin is Eiffel Tower president and helped lead the bid for Paris to make Olympic history again.
In 1924, for the Paris Olympics, it was the first competition that was live broadcasted on the radio, and the radio was on the Eiffel Tower. So we have a story with the Olympics.
Beneath the tower, a rare opportunity to see how the elevators work. What goes up must come down. They are hydraulic powered, using water, taking 100 trips up and down each day. In the 19th century, this was an engineering feat, helping folks avoid the stairs. There are a lot of them. But amazingly, Gustave Eiffel preferred them. And he would climb the stairs up here every day.
He had his office here, and he went every day to work.
Should we go and meet your great-great-grandfather? That office, still there today. Wow, this is amazing.
And so moving for me too. My grandfather with his blue eyes, a very athletic man. He was a swimmer, a fencer.
And speaking of athletes, the tower will be a focal point of next year's Olympics. Several events taking place at the base. Just down there, the beach volleyball. You could call this the nosebleed seats. The centerpiece of the Paris Games, like her American cousin, the Statue of Liberty, represents a message from the past about believing in the future, about the power of hopes and dreams. For 41 years, the Eiffel Tower was the tallest building in the world, surpassing the Washington Monument, which of course means it is a perfect place to watch those Olympic events. But if you do get here to Paris, one piece of advice: remember your sunglasses and to always be armed with a glass of rosé. Salute.
Okay, Keir, salute to you too. Before we go, it's time for the future of everything, and we are looking up, way, way up. A former NASA engineer nicknamed the Space Mechanic joins us to talk about all things Mars and beyond and what he had to overcome to get to that point. I don't know about you, but to me, there's something universal about being a little kid staring up at the night sky and wondering about everything that could be out there. And now more Americans are feeling the ground shake and seeing more rockets take off than any other time in history. But you want to know what isn't always universal? Access to the kinds of education, the kinds of jobs that get you closer to the stars. It is possible, but sometimes it feels like a moonshot. And tonight on The Future of Everything, we are meeting someone who is able to work his way into some of the highest reaching programs humans have ever undertaken. We're about to introduce you to Elio Murillo. He didn't grow up with a lot between New York City and Puerto Rico, but he always found inspiration in the stars. Now, a little backstory: he studied at the University of Michigan, then he worked for years on the NASA Mars 2020 program. He helped on the Perseverance rover mission. He even helped launch the first flight on another planet, working on the team that flew the Ingenuity helicopter on Mars. And Elio joins us now. He just released a book called The Boy Who Reached for the Stars. Elio, thanks so much for joining us. I got to ask, how does someone growing up without a lot lead to a life of reaching up and touching the sky?
Hey, it's an honor to be here. And to answer that, the beauty of it that I highlight in my story and in my book is I've been surrounded by a nurturing community that I've built, that I have connected with over many years and many facets of my life, be it through school, be it through friends, through family and chosen family. And that constant support, that involvement in community has, despite not having much, made it in many ways easier to have dreams and visions that I could slowly but surely accomplish, and never alone, always with a supportive community around me.
I gotta say, I mean, to be honest, diversity, historically speaking, has been something that's been missing from a lot of our space programs. The community that you're talking about, so much of that you built, but do you think overall it's starting to change?
I think there's a lot of work to be done. And when we talk about representation in STEM careers in general, right now I'll speak for the Hispanic community, which I'm very involved in particular in this push for more representation in STEM. 20% of the country, the United States right now, is Hispanic, about 20%. It's a figure maybe a few years old now. And in STEM, there's only about 8% representation for Hispanics. So there's a clear disparity. And by the mid-2050s, 2060s, the majority of the country, it's going to tilt over to being primarily Hispanic. So we want to make sure that gap is closed. And there's a lot of work to be done. And part of me telling my story is exactly that despite oftentimes having so many challenges imposed on us by things that are outside of our control generally, and we may not grow up in much with much, we can still pursue our dreams. We can pursue education. We can find advocates. We can find mentors that will open doors for us. And at the same time, thereafter, it's our responsibility to keep those doors open and continue opening doors for more people to join after us.
It's so true. And the big question, the question that I'm hoping to answer someday for myself, when are you going to space? Fantastic question. I'm hoping to go to space through a civilian space program in the upcoming years. There's a few opportunities. I applied for the Space for Humanity program very recently, but I think ultimate goal in my lifetime is to actually step on the moon, and something very achievable within the next 20 years. I mean, I just turned 30 a few weeks ago. Most astronauts, they're in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. So I think it's a very reasonable plan to have and to start working on from now. So I'll be there. All right, that's reasonable. I'll go with the unreasonable. I know you're known as the space mechanic. I'm down to fly on a rocket that you build, and then we'll go to the moon. You never know what's going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years. So if that happens, sign me up for one of those first flights. Elio, thanks so much.
We'll do it. I'll see you there.
And we might not be able to get close to most of the stars in the sky, but NASA is bringing us as close to them as possible. And thanks to the James Webb Telescope, we don't have to imagine. It is giving us insight into the origins of the universe. Take a look at Saturday's edition of Inspiring America.
James Webb begins a voyage back to the birth of the universe.
As soon as it was launched on Christmas Day 2 years ago, the world held its breath. Then, in the poet's words, we slipped the surly bonds of Earth and touched the face of God, or at least we caught a glimpse. The Webb Space Telescope is a virtual time machine. Using infrared radiation, it captures light first cast billions of years ago, which is then transformed into these stunning images. So now humankind can actually see galaxies being born. NASA astrophysicist Amber Strawn.
We've recognized when we look at these beautiful images that we really are looking back at our origins.
We're looking at ourselves.
Absolutely. We're looking at ourselves.
Webb has inspired awe and taught us more about our infinitesimal place in the cosmos.
One galaxy has hundreds of billions of stars and probably hundreds of billions of planets.
Wait, hold on. I need to process what you're saying. One galaxy has hundreds of billions of stars. And we're talking about hundreds of billions of galaxies?
Yes.
Possibly a trillion galaxies.
Yes.
That is a number that is just so hard to compute.
It is. It's staggering.
Strawn was inspired as a young girl growing up in rural Arkansas, gazing up at the star-filled sky. Now, the images from the Webb Space Telescope have reinforced her deep belief we are all in this together.
This idea that the iron in our blood and the calcium in our bones was literally forged inside of a star that exploded billions of years ago as a supernova. We're connected viscerally to the universe, and I think also shows that we're connected to each other. All of these divisions that we have, in a big sense, we're connected to everyone else on the earth in a very fundamental way.
Mark Clampin was a young boy growing up in England. This event redirected the course of his life and led to his position as Webb's chief scientist.
The first person who really inspired me when I was young and basically made me want to work in this field is Neil Armstrong, first man to walk on the moon. For me, that was a very inspirational moment. You know, we'd sent people all the way to the moon, and then you could go and set up experiments on the moon and do science there.
At first, Craig Robinson didn't think a lot about space. Now retired, he was the Webb project leader who helped the mission get back on track after a series of setbacks.
Your backstory is fascinating. You're one of 11 kids, right? Your parents were sharecroppers. What led you to look up at the stars?
Well, growing up, I was not a space guy. Certainly, I enjoyed math and science. I was pretty good at both.
And you were good at football, too.
And I was pretty good at football. And so I always said if I ever got a chance to go to college, I wanted to major in something technical.
And so what was it that finally brought you into NASA?
After I finished college, there were some friends and colleagues that had done internships at NASA. So let me take a peek and see what it's all about. And once you go through the gate and start working, the bug bites you. We call it living the dream, and you start living the dream right away, all the way to the end. And I'm still dreaming even after retirement.
And so are we. You can watch Inspiring America, the 2023 Inspiration List, tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern on NBC. And that does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you on Monday, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.